The night the HOA called 911 on my son for fishing our own shoreline, I realized this lake wasn't just water. It was my father's voice, my grandfather's hands, my family's name, and I wasn't letting anyone rewrite that story. The air was cold that night. Cedar smoke drifted from the fire pit, and my boy sat quiet on the dock with the old Zebco reel my dad left him. The bobber drifted near the stump line, right where the bass liked to hide at sunset. He wasn't bothering anyone, just a kid, fishing under the orange sky. Then came the sound. 2 golf carts buzzing down the path like they owned the night. Headlights slicing across the water. HOA board members, and at the front, their queen herself, Karen, clipboard in hand. That windbreaker zipped up like armor. She pointed at my dock like it was a crime scene. "You can't be here after dusk," she barked. "HOA rules. Our lake. Our security. Move." I could feel my jaw tighten. I'd only been here 3 weeks. Bought this old ranch and the shoreline that came with it. Deed older than the HOA itself. But I stayed calm. "Ma'am," I said, "I own this dock. This shoreline. My property extends to the middle of the lake. We're well within our rights." She gave me that little smile, the one people wear when they think they've already won. "That's not how it works here," she said. "We have lake patrol. We set ours. We write citations." And she looked at my son. "You're trespassing after dark." That word trespassing hit me like a stone dropped in deep water. My dad used to tell me water remembers who's kind to it. And that night I promised myself this lake was going to remember my family. I said, "We're not moving." Her lips tightened. "Fine," she snapped. "I'll call the sheriff." And she did. 911 claimed I was hostile and possibly drunk. I haven't had a drink in years. The sheriff's SUV showed up 10 minutes later. Gravel popped under the tires. Out stepped Deputy King's steady man, the kind who doesn't rush to judge. He listened to her, then to me. Looked at the dock, looked at the kid, then said quietly, "This sounds civil, not criminal." Karen fumed. "Our rules are enforceable." King turned to me. "Got any paperwork?" Oh, I had paperwork. I walked him to my truck and pulled out the old file I kept since closing day, the deed, the century-old survey, the new plat map, and a letter from my title attorney confirming the lake connected to the North Fork. "River a navigable waterway." King whistled low. "You've done your homework." "Yes, sir," I said. "And the HOA didn't." See, the morning after I moved in, I started digging. County records, state boating laws, navigation codes, every page, every clause. Ordinary high water mark. Federal jurisdiction. State boating enforcement. By the time I was done, I could have taught a law class called How to Keep a Karen Off Your Dock. The truth was simple. An HOA can manage beaches, parks, and private launches, but not navigable waters. They can't set curfews, enforce fake tickets, or police state waterways. Not here. Not anywhere under Title 3.3. Deputy King looked at Karen. "Ma'am, this connects to the North Fork. That makes it a state waterway. You can't enforce HOA rules on that. It should have been the end of it. But folks like Karen don't stop when they lose once." The next week, Lake Patrol appeared, HOA volunteers in a pontoon boat with flashing yellow lights like mall cops of the water. They circled our dock every night, shouting into bullhorns about curfew violations and citations. They even taped red tickets to my mailbox. That's when I decided, enough. I called the State Wildlife and Parks office. Got a hold of a sergeant, a man with the voice of someone who's seen too many neighbor wars on too many lakes. He said, "I'll come out myself." 2 days later, a green state boat slid up to my dock. The officer stepped out, calm as morning fog. He looked through the HOA's so-called citations and said, flat out, "These look official." They're not. "You're impersonating law enforcement." And he warned them, "Take this any further, and the Attorney General's office will handle it." The pontoon patrol vanished that day. But Karen wasn't done yet. She switched tactics, paper warfare. Certified letters, threats of liens. Photos of my boy on a kayak, circled in red ink, like he'd robbed a bank. That's when I brought out the heavy artillery. Truth and We filed complaints with the state and the Army. Corps of Engineers about their illegal buoys and private lake signs. And then I installed proper, permitted buoys, clean, official, and numbered right where the state told me to. I even framed the federal navigation rules in my boathouse, next to my father's old fishing photo. Message delivered. This wasn't a sandbox. It was a waterway. 2 weeks later, 3 official trucks rolled through the HOA's fancy gates county code enforcement, state wildlife, and the U.S. Army Corps. They took photos, measurements, and notes. Then they wrote real citations against the HOA, unpermitted structures, obstructing a navigable channel, unauthorized enforcement signage. Karen just stood there, pale and quiet. When she finally turned to me, her voice shook. "You did this." I said, "No, ma'am." The law did. That was the turning point. The patrols stopped. The yelling stopped. Even the neighbors started realizing how far things had gone. Old-timers came back to fish again. One veteran, Mr. Knapp, shook my hand and said, "Haven't heard this lake so peaceful in years." And in that moment, I swear I could hear my father whisper, "Water remembers." But there was one last move left in Karen's playbook. She tried locking the public ramp, the same gravel ramp that crossed my land. Installed a shiny steel gate at dusk, padlocked tight with a sign, HOA key required for access. I didn't shout. Didn't argue. I called my surveyor and Deputy King. When they arrived, I had the map pinned to a board, boundaries marked bright orange. King looked at the gate, at the map, then at her. "Remove it," he said. Now, she tried to argue community good and shared interest. The surveyor pointed to the rebar pin. 3 feet inside his line, he said. She went pale again. The maintenance crew unbolted the gate piece by piece. And just like that, the lake could breathe again. That night, I sat on the dock with my son. Loons called from the far cove. The water shimmered gold under the porch light. He caught a smallmouth bass and smiled like the world was right again. Calm wasn't about silence, it was about respect. And for the first time in years, I felt both. I won't pretend I wasn't proud. But it wasn't the loud kind of pride. It was quiet, steady, earned. Because this fight wasn't for bragging rights. It was for legacy. My father used to say, "Land is borrowed from your children, and water is borrowed from time." Now I understood what he meant. Weeks later, at the next HOA meeting, something amazing happened. The crowd was different. New faces. The old guard silent. A retired Coast Guard chief stood up and calmly explained the navigation laws better than I ever could. Even Karen stayed quiet. When the meeting ended, I brought donuts for everyone. No gloating, no speeches, just neighbors trying to live right again. And I said we all share the same water. We should act like it. These days, the lake is peaceful. The only lights at night are porch bulbs and lanterns on docks. People wave again. Kids fish again. And when the game warden motors by, he just tips his cap. The lake is calm again. And for the first time in years, so am I. Sometimes, the rules that matter aren't the ones that give us power. They're the ones that remind us to do right. Have you ever faced an HOA like this? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you believe some fights are worth having, hit subscribe. Let's stand up together.